Thank you, Chair. A report published last year by CIPD and the High Pay Centre found that in 2017, average chief executive officer pay in Financial Times Stock Exchange, 100 companies, FTSE 100, had increased by 23% from the previous year. It also found that 68 FTSE 100 chief executives now earn more than 100 times than that of the average UK worker's salary, £29,000, according to the ONS. It will take the average UK worker 195 years to earn the mean FTSE 100 CEO reward package. These stats make for uncomfortable reading, and while all of these companies are publicly listed and shareholders can vote on pay policies, there are many large private companies not required to follow these rules. I'm sure you'd have seen that new regulations that came into effect at the start of this year that will force UK-listed firms with more than 250 employees to disclose pay ratios and explain the gap between the earnings of top executives and workers came into effect from the start of this year. This is a positive step and should help in providing some transparency to the pay gap and give workers a voice. I've always been clear, the success of any business is a collective effort. Too often, corporate achievement is not shared fairly enough. The most important first step that any business can take towards ensuring fair pay is by ensuring that those in the lowest paid jobs are receiving a fair deal for their work. That means paying the London Living Wage, and I urge all employers to seek accreditation with the Living Wage Foundation. Beyond that, I'd like to see more employers looking seriously at the gap between the highest and lowest paid people in the organisations. This week we launched beta testing for my Good Work Standard, and my officials are now working with pioneering businesses who are eager to seek accreditation and champion the highest standards in pay and conditions. Through it, we hope to influence more and more of London's employers to pay the London Living Wage and create more high-quality, flexible work opportunities so that employees can progress in their chosen careers and benefit from the success of their companies and the economy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We think we moved from Child Obesity to the Fat Cat Friday, 4th of January this year, the date by which just 3 days into the working year, the average CEO of a FTSE 100 company received an amount equivalent to the take-home pay of a UK full-time worker on average pay for the whole of 2019, which is up 11% compared to last year. And the gap is wider still when compared to those on the national minimum wage. So what does this enormous executive pay gap mean for economic fairness in London?
I think our city is demonstrably unequal. It's a good example of an unequal society. And I think unequal society is not simply less productive, but they're less happy. And I think I'm really nervous about, if you think about a caravan, those at the front of the caravan trail going further and further away from those at the back of the caravan trail. That's why it's really important that we have policies to not just reduce inequality, but to improve the life conditions of some of the poorest Londoners.
And would you agree with the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development and the High Pay Centre in their call for a major overhaul of how executive pay is set in the UK, including corporate remuneration committees being more diverse in terms of gender, ethnicity and professional background, and for executive performance to be based on benchmarks including employee well-being and workforce training? And what's your view of the implications of the Prime Minister breaking her promise to include workers on company boards?
I think you raised a number of really important points. As far as transparency is concerned, I genuinely think sunlight is the best disinfectant. That's why when I became mayor, voluntarily, I published our pay audits, not just by gender, so you can look at the gender pay gap, but also ethnicity, really, very important. We're doing some work in relation to disability and other of the protected characteristics as well. Unless you know and you can measure, how can you realise we've got a problem that needs addressing? But side by side with that's got to be an action plan. There's no point simply knowing we've got a gender pay gap or an ethnicity pay gap. We've got to have plans how we rectify that. That's what our time and the policy we have is all about. Unfortunately, not all businesses, not all the public sector do it voluntarily. That's why there's a need for legislation to require them for them to do so. I'd like to see even small companies, where they're able to do so, publish this data. I'll give you one example. It often means some members of staff who lack confidence to ask for a pay rise will do so knowing that they see their peers doing similar work getting paid a higher salary. But in relation to representation on boards, I think it's really important for there to be representation on boards. So you can look somebody in an eye if you're giving yourself a massive pay rise and somebody's not getting a massive pay rise, and try and justify to them why you deserve that pay rise. But also I think the criteria for giving pay rises needs to be looked into as well. And you raised some really good points in relation to some of the things a good employer should be looking at when they decide whether to give themselves a pay rise and a pat on the back.